Okay, here I am up under my Oldsmobile. Got the 9" here, and I want to check my pinion angle. So the pinion angle is, you take the angle of this here surface will work on this rear end. It's not the same on all rear ends. Some you have to take it directly off here, but I don't have to. I can take it off of here and avoid taking my dry shaft off. And then you take the angle of the dry shaft, and because one thing that is important to point out, when you're figuring pinion angle, you're looking at the angle of this in relation to the drive shaft. You're not thinking in relation to the floor or any other thing like that. And these things aren't designed to be more than like 4 or 5 degrees of angle, and you actually want quite a bit less than that, because you have chassis flex, and your suspension can move. Because when we set negative pinion angle, we're compensating for acceleration under torque, but that does not, it actually goes the other way when you're decelerating, right? So if you downshift, the pumpkin can go down. Hopefully not too much, but it can go down some. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure this. We're going to measure the dry shaft. We're going to figure out what the pinion angle is right now. And then up above here, I have my adjustable arms that I can change the lengths of. Currently, they are set to as close as I could get to the same length as the stock ones, because you want to start somewhere, right? And then I'll move them as I have to. And then later on, I'll get into explaining things that you can do, like if you're at the track for tuning. Okay, so we're going to attempt to do this, and I have here my piece of angle that I'm going to do this with. Magnetic. So then I can put the angle up here. It's hard for me to get a good spot, so currently the rear end is angled down a little over 5 degrees. Okay, so that's definitely going to have to be angled up. I'll move the camera here a little bit so you can see it, but the accuracy is going to be tough with holding it with one hand, but basically that's what we have. So we know already that the pinion angle is pretty high, because you can visibly see that the dry shaft is uphill a few degrees. So, but we're going to measure it and find out. Right here is a good example of why you really want to measure instead of going by your eyeball, because I thought that dry shaft was angled downhill and it's actually dead flat. Okay, so I have a negative pinion angle of 5 degrees because it's 0 plus the 5 degrees that the rear end is angled down. The way it is, if you road tested it, it might not vibrate. I don't know, because everything seems to be making me take a long time to do this. But I'm going to adjust it using those adjustable upper trailing arms, and then we'll get it tuned in. Okay, so get this up here, and it's hard to read, but it's just about 3. All right, so the way that we adjust these is you have this piece in the middle here that's left-handed thread on one end, and it's right-handed thread on the other. That way, when you turn it this way, it gets longer. When you turn it this way, it gets tighter. So depending on which way you want the rear end to go, you adjust that back and forth. You have a lock nut on each end, and you have to tighten both of those when you're done, of course. And the next thing you need to do is you need to count your flats to make sure that you're doing the same mount on each side. Now, there are racers that will like adjust one side and not the other at the track to control it from turning or whatever. But for street use and general track duty, you want these two both the same length. Now the next thing here is this blue piece here, this brace here. This of course I made, but it was based on an extra cost option that came on like the 442s and some of the other 4-speed A bodies. And what it did was they connect this bolt here, which of course is the pivot for the lower control arm, and it connects it to the upper control arm just out of sight where my hand is. And what it does is it braces this cross member from flexing. Now this cross member, yeah, you can see it's pretty tall. Straight up and down it's very strong, but forward to back it's not. When I had the rear end out, had this apart, I could grab onto this with both hands and flex it forward to back. So, and you can imagine how much stronger this engine is compared to me. And so having these braces make a big difference. This can change the way the car handles entirely on a launch because of the way the rear end works. It's going to pull harder on one of these bars than it does on the other, and because of that the thing will flex one way or the other, and that will cause rear steer, and that's what these bars are for. And in my opinion, if you're on a budget and you can only afford to buy one thing at a time, you get your 4-speed bars first. You can purchase these, you don't have to make them. I just chose to make them. So that's the next thing on the line. So what's after this? So we have adjustability up here. We have our 4-speed bars bracing it up, even though it's an automatic car. And now, what's the next thing that we would want to look at? So here, I have my lower control arms. These are Lakewood bars, but they could just as well be stock ones. It doesn't matter. These ones have hard bushings in them, which is why I like them. That helps control some of the flex and all that too. The addition of a sway bar in the rear is a good idea, even for drag racing. Some people run a rear bar and not a front bar on drag cars. On a street car, of course, I prefer to run both, and so this car has both. The next thing after it is there's two ways to get separation with these factory 4-links. One is to move the pivot points up here on the rear end. They have kits to do that. And the other way is to move the pivot point for the lower bars. As you can see, I chose this method because when I ordered this rear end, it's Quick Performance, I ordered it with these extra holes. There's 5 of them. For now, I set it on the middle one because since I haven't even test driven the car yet, I figured a good place to start is the middle. So then that way I've only got 2 more tries before I get the right one. And I actually think the middle one will be pretty darn good the way it is. And so what this does is to get this trailing arm angling upward so that it's going to create some lift on takeoff. And because I lowered the car with lowering springs, that leveled out these upper bars. Because before those were pointed uphill, and that's completely wrong. That's why these cars wheel hop. Getting these upper bars flattened out and getting this lower bar angling up gives you some separation so that it'll try to lift the body rather than lift the back tire. And the sway bar will help equalize the movement from one side to the other. And the bracing up of this will keep it from trying to steer on you. And all of that stuff together will make this rear suspension work a lot better than stock when you're trying to launch the thing. And so here we go, on to the next thing. All right, here I doped out the geometry of the rear suspension on this car. And this is to show how you can figure out where you're at when you're trying to tune your rear suspension. If you have the adjustable upper bars, you can change your pinion angle quite a bit. But what it can also happen is you can change the angles of these bars based on, one, ride height and whether you move the mounting points. Now, on my particular car, this mounting point here is the lower bar. There's 5 choices. That mounting point can be moved up and down. And up here, they make kits where you can move that one too, but I don't have it on mine. So you can change the angles of both of these bars depending on how you build your suspension. But why it matters is this point right here. This is your pivot point of your 4-bar suspension. I know there's some people call it instant center and like that, which is fine, but you know, that's just where the 2 bars meet. And it's out 53 inches forward of the lower pivot, and it is 13¼ inches off the ground. And the reason why that matters is that how hard the rear suspension hits when you launch depends on how long this is. Okay, so if you change the angle of either of these bars to move this pivot point out, it makes it a softer hit, but it's a longer lasting push down. If you shorten this up, it hits a lot harder right at the start line, but it runs its course faster and it could outrun your shocks on you. Another thing that can happen is this height. On a stock rear suspension on these A-bodies, these bars actually never meet. The lower bar is probably flat to maybe 1 or 2 degrees, and this one is angled up, so they never meet. And that never meet condition is why you have your wheel hop. But the other thing that can happen is if this pivot point is too high, you can also, you don't have what they call separation. If it's above the center line of the car, it won't lift the rear end and it won't plant the tires as much. And that may or may not be what you want, because it depends on how hard you want the back tires to hit. If you had wrinkle wall slicks, you don't want it to hit so hard that it flattens the slicks. Though if you have drag radials, they have a stiffer sidewall, and a harder hit might help them because, you know, it gives them more traction. And so this is what this is about. You want to be able to know where this is as an idea. Now, you don't have to do the trigonometry to figure this out. Basically, the basic things that you want to know is you want to know that these two are pointing toward each other and not away from each other like stock condition. You want them pointing toward each other somehow. You want the pivot point to be below the center of gravity of the car, which generally speaking, they say that's at about the height of the camshaft. And as far as how far out you want this pivot point, see, this is where it's handy to have an idea how this works. You can have a friend videotape your car, you know, with his GoPro while you're launching at the drag strip, and you can figure out how much is the rear end rising. Are you getting wheel pop? Is it hooking it first and then skipping 6 to 8 feet down? Those things give you clues as to how this needs to be adjusted. For instance, if you have wheel hop, these aren't pointing together well enough, right? Either one needs to be steeper this way or this one needs to be steeper that way. If it's hitting hard and it launches good at the start line, but a little further out it starts to spin like it skips, that's this pivot point is too short. They're pointing toward each other too much. And if you have the pivot point out way too far, you may not hook up at the start line because you're not giving it enough leverage to push down. So this is a short, simple tutorial on this, but generally speaking, the biggest thing is these two things are pointing towards each other. That's the biggest thing. Okay, I decided I should probably go over it in what I think is the order of importance as far as if you're on a budget, regular guy like me with a regular guy job can't buy all the stuff at once. What order do the things have to be purchased in so that you're getting incremental improvements as you go rather than having to buy the whole package, right? The number one most important thing is the frame braces that I refer to as 4-speed bars. I don't recall what General Motors used to call them. They were optional back in the day. And you can get those through Summit Racing, probably through Jags, and probably through a bunch of other places. If you call them up and ask for 4-speed bars, they'll kind of know what you mean. I think that's the first thing. The second most important thing, I would say, would be decent tires. I know when I bought my drag radials, it's like, wow, what a difference. I think tires is number two. I believe the third most important thing would be some lift bars. I like the lift bars from the bottom. This setup is from Quick Performance, put the brackets on for me, but if you have a stock rear end, Lakewood makes a lift bar kit where you bolt on some brackets and you can weld them if you want to, and then they give you a pair of lower bars and you can get some good angle on the lower bars that way. That would be the next thing to go to. The next thing after that, I think, would be a sway bar, because it equalizes the sides a little bit and it makes the car handle better. The next thing after that is I would be looking at pinion angle and seeing if I needed adjustable upper bars. You may or may not. In my case, I started out with the upper bars at the stock length and my pinion angle was way off, but your car might not be. And the only utility of them is to be able to adjust angles, and if the angle is good, you don't need to adjust them. But I would look at those. Check your pinion angle would be the next thing. The next thing after that, I would say, would be shocks and or springs, whichever you know, if your springs are worn out, it just makes sense to replace what's worn out. But a good set of shocks would be a good idea. And from there, it would be learning how to adjust things. One thing you can do a lot of good with is if the shocks are adjustable, you can do a lot with that. After that, probably last place, and I know this is going to sound strange, the last thing is the posi unit, if you don't have it. I know from experience that I got my Firebird down to 185 60-foot times with a one-legger rear end. It wasn't easy, but it's doable. And I understand that a posi unit and more gear probably would have got me even lower. I mean, there's people that run 1.6 60 foots and, well, even better, you know, the higher end people. But that's the order that I would go. Because personally, with the rear suspension that's on this, I bet a one-legger rear end would hold 400 horsepower easily with a suspension like what is on this. I have the posi unit because, well, I wanted one, but, you know, right now I'm in the mode of, you know, trying to say what I believe is most important to least important. And that's kind of the order that I go in. And for all those things, I think you can have a really good hooking up car if you do these things. So I wish you all luck and hope everything goes well, and take it easy.